Okay, good morning or afternoon or evening, everyone, wherever you're joining us from. We're talking with Mark Brayne today about intergenerational trauma. Before we start, and as people are joining us, if you can drop in the chat where you're from, just always interested where people are from. And I'm going to make a few announcements. For those of us who are interested in Mark Brayne's work, Mark is coming to Denver next month. So I have the pleasure to host him here for a relatively small training. So we have a few more spots open for that. We are also going to have Mark as part of our book club. And the book club is about to get a major upgrade. So if you want to join the book club now at its current price of $10 a month or $100 a year, I dropped the link to the book club.
Send it again because it bounced
I
me.
am also going to mute all, Mark, and then you unmute yourself because we have some. Hold on one second here. Here you go. Mute all. Okay. A few more announcements. We have a lot of webinars. We have another webinar this week on Thursday about the safe EMDR protocol. Next week about common errors in EMDR. We have Ricky Greenwald next month. We have Jackie Flynn about EMDR with kids. So a lot of webinars, and more are coming. I'm just, trying to keep up and with my seeing clients and doing all that and updating all the webinars that we're having. I also am working on our content for next year. For those of us who are joining us, if you can drop in the chat, where are you from? I see some familiar faces and some new ones too. So that's always nice. And I think we are ready. So what we're going to do is Mark and I will have a conversation for about 30 minutes, and then we will give you the opportunity to ask Mark some questions. So Mark Brayne, welcome back to the Art and Science of EMDR, regular guest. Oh, you're still muted. Sorry about that.
Very, very nice to be with you. And it's nice to have, I see 53 people with us, which is a lot of fun.
Yes, more people are joining us.
One or two from the UK as well, which is also nice.
Yes. And today we're talking about intergenerational trauma. So I wanted to start by asking you, what is intergenerational trauma? Is it something genetic? Is it in people's genes? Is there research about it? Or is it kind of like more like a concept that we have, that we work with?
I could talk straight for 30 minutes in answer to that, but I'll try and keep it really tight so it's a conversation. The key thing here is that as I've developed and worked with EMDR over the last 20 years, since training in 2004, I came to realize that we're working, as many of you will know, with parts and ego states and aspects of self, whatever language you use for this. We're working with old stories that have embedded in the system and which are acting themselves out in the present dysfunctionally. That's why people come to therapy. So they're right at the heart of EMDR. What do? We find these dysfunctional memory networks, we activate them, we apply bilateral stimulation, and the AIP kicks in, and with any luck, and with a bit of focus and a bit of interweaving and so on, the clients get better, largely on the whole, sometimes spectacularly quickly, sometimes bit of a longer slog. But as I've unfolded, as I've developed in my own practice and sort of got the hang of this thing to some extent, I've increasingly come to realize and understand and feel how we can rewire the past as if it's real. So the stories that our clients bring, whether it's their own childhood or a particularly nasty trauma that they've been through, car crash, school shooting or whatever it is, we reactivate it in the here and now as if it is happening in the here and now, which is why in EMDR we use the present tense all the time. You know, what are you feeling? What is happening? Not what did you feel? What was happening? So we're rewiring. Reveal, rewire, repair is a term I use. Mainstream EMDR, if you like. And I was working, doing an in-person workshop about 7 years ago or so, I think now, something like 7 years ago. I was doing a piece of work, a demonstration piece with somebody where I realized, well, wait a minute, this is not your stuff. We were in a childhood story. There was a child looking dramatically on Daly's iPhone there, which was rather fun. We are working with a childhood story as if it's for real. That we're working with the child in the child ego state through the adult in the here and now. And I realized really strongly, really powerfully, I thought, wait a minute, this is not your stuff. This is mum's stuff. And so I did a piece of work basically doing EMDR on the mother as embedded in the client's memory, experience, visceral nervous system. So to answer your question, Rotem, what is it? Is it a concept? Is it epigenetics? Is it, is it past lives? Is it, something external to us? Whatever your belief system, you could probably find a way of understanding this, like past lives, or there's a book by Mark Brayne called It Didn't Start With You, which is well worth reading, but he goes a bit too far for me in this sort of literal reenactment of the past in the present. But the past is constantly present in our work, and it's not just the individual past, it's actually the collective family past, it's the tribal past, it's the species past, 3.5 billion years of the evolution of life on the planet, so there's an awful lot going on in every single session. And if you're alive to the invitation that those stories are extending to you, the therapist, it is amazing where you can go with this. So it's all of the above, really.
I'm curious about that client that you mentioned, and more specifically about this client, but also in general. Does the client need to know the story, to hear the explicit story from mom in order to hold it in the nervous system, or can it pass intergenerationally without the client hearing the specific details of what had happened?
That's an extremely good question. The answer is absolutely the body keeps the score, to use a famous phrase, Bessel van der Kolk. It's the stories that we experience, that our nervous system is exposed to, are in the impact of those events, not just trauma. And this is right at the heart of all of my workshops. I go beyond trauma, and I'm doing a presentation a half-day presentation to the EMDRIA online conference next month on this. EMDR, trauma and formative experience, an EMDR, a treatment paradigm shift, because my invitation to us all is to go beyond trauma and deeper than trauma. It's the human beings, the individuals who come into therapy with us, are the sum total of their individual, collective, and species experience. So we're exposed to experience millisecond by millisecond. That's how fast the nervous system works. And what we pick up is explicit, what our mothers and fathers say, do, what we observe, what's conscious, if you like, at the time. But we pick up a huge amount of information implicitly as well in the way I work a lot with Jewish clients, for example, and the story of the Holocaust and the story of refugees. I was working with somebody this morning whose mother was, had to live in hiding all the way through the Second World War. Whoever we're working with, whether it's Jewish background or people of color or immigration or racism or just being human, there's a massive story behind every single individual who comes in. And that story, explicit and implicit, is what we're cooked in. It's the marinade of our childhood, of our formative early experiences, not just trauma. It's not just the bad stuff that happens. It's the stuff that we're cooked in, the sauce that we're cooked in. So there will be stories that are accessible in explicit memory terms, but there's a lot that we only co-imagine with the client. And the thing that I love about this work is when we are willing to drop into the story, it's astonishing, a bit like family constellations. If anybody who is here today has done family constellations, it's sometimes almost shocking what comes out in the accuracy when you look at it afterwards. I don't personally believe in sort of external realities being stored outside the individual, but in the internal system, there's so much more available to be worked on than just what people remember.
Yeah, I'm curious. You mentioned the Holocaust, and I, I have a Jewish background. I'm Jewish, and I grew up in Israel, where we had a Holocaust Remembrance Day every year at school, and we would hear the stories and meet with survivors and watch some movies. And then last year on October 7th, I think that many Jewish people around the world, not just the ones who grew up in Israel, had a visceral reaction, a nervous system reaction. I know personally, I had some nightmares and full-blown symptoms of PTSD for something that I wasn't even there. But there were so many correlations there, people hiding, kids talking, and then parents have to lock their mouth for them not to be discovered, people burned to death. All these things happen and triggered immediately for many people. And I've talked with a lot of people around the world, mostly in the US, but from Israel and from around the world. And that has been an immediate trigger of these Holocaust, and obviously most people who experience these traumas were not in the Holocaust. They were not in Europe in the 1930s and early 40s.
And you asked about the genetic or epigenetic transmission of trauma, and many colleagues here today will probably know the work of Rachel Yehuda, working with Holocaust families of Holocaust survivors, and also with 9/11 survivors in New York. Rachel Yehuda, she's Jewish background herself. Her research is enormously worth reading. And she has unpacked with her team indicators in the epigenetic signature that gets passed down, particularly between grandfathers and grandchildren. And they've looked also at generations in, I think it's northern Sweden, who went through or northern Norway, who went through really difficult famine about 100 years ago. To what extent that's echoing down the generation as visible and testable in the epigenetic makeup of the genes. In other words, to what extent is a sensitivity to traumatization, to PTSD perhaps, partly genetic. And it's pretty clear that from this research that there can be a susceptibility built in that is passed down through the epigenetic, through not the gene so much as the epigenetic, how the genes then fire and wire, what's on the genes.
The expression of the gene.
The expression of the genes, yes. It's not sort of hardwired, but if you're under stress, one nervous system will go that way and another one will go that way. What I don't buy into is that I don't go into past lives personally, that you need to believe somehow that there is an external past life that's been acted out in the client. But what I do find, I don't believe in it because I work with it all the time, is that the stories that we're cooked in, implicit and explicit, are available for work. So what I realize, working with Russians or Ukrainians, for example, or Serbs or Croats, obviously Jewish people with Jewish backgrounds have 500,000 years of history in which they're cooked. People with Islamic backgrounds have, from 600 AD in which they're cooked. People with Christian backgrounds go, whatever group whatever group the individual comes from, there will be big collective narratives that have been I've been around in that individual's formative early years, whether they're voiced or not. Some cultures voice them much more dramatically and obviously, as the Jewish culture does, than other cultures. But what I find liberating in my EMDR work, and to be honest, Rotem, I wouldn't be able to be an effective EMDR without this tool in my toolkit, is factoring in a curiosity around what's the bigger story that's running here, not just the individual's experience of their formative years and traumas and so on. Trauma history, you just take your 10 worst memories, which I don't do anymore because I use the bridging point in the here and now to take us into the networks that need to be addressed. I take enough trauma history, enough history to find out, what's knocking about in the undergrowth. Where might we go? And then I use the present as a bridging point, using very much Laurel Parnell's approach, because the nervous system will tell us where to go and we can trust where we land. And if we land in we usually land in a childhood story around the age of 7, sort of the time where it happens, where stuff gets locked down. And an infant is so tuned in to the experience of mother in particular, but the family system and father and primary caregivers, but particularly mother. The nervous system is finally responding to, taking in, observing, feeling, coming to conclusions about how am I, who am I in the world, am I safe? Fundamentally, at amygdala level, safe, not safe. And the programming that gets burned in is not just what the mother says or what the parents or the family story tells the child, but it's built up trillions upon trillions of moments if you think that the amygdala works at the millisecond level. So you've got we are stories on legs. Human beings are fundamentally stories on legs. And if we unpack that and recognize the story is in there, even if it's purely imagined, we can target it and work with it and process it as if it's for real happening in the here and now. I was working with I often come back to Jewish clients because there's the story's available. In fact, so many Jewish clients know the story because I've been told it in multiple dimensions. I was working very recently with a lovely client where we went back to having to hide in Eastern Europe at the time of the Nazis. And as you say, having to be quiet for years. They were under the floorboards of a non-Jewish household that were looking after them, protecting them all the way through the war. So this kid learned, I don't say anything. Guess what's happening 70 years later? Or 50 years later? I'm not saying anything. And this is actually not 70 years later because it's the mother who went through that. And so the child, now 50, is still reenacting those stories. And it's visceral. It's very rewarding to work with. And I work in a very directive, curious, radical curiosity way to drill down into the story that probably was true. We don't know the literal truth of the story always, but we can have the metaphorical truth, and we work with that as a target.
Yeah. So you mentioned already kind of like I'm picking on phase 1, you're doing a more thorough history taking. You're not just asking about the individual history. You're asking about the intergenerational, the cultural, right? That's part of it. Mm-hmm. Phase 2, I heard you mention Laurel Parnell. And I know you kind of updated/upgraded Laurel Parnell's work with working with supportive figures. Can you talk maybe for a minute or two about that? How do we do that? How do we improve on the standard safe place and container that we learned in basic EMDR training?
I tap in, which is a much better term than install. There's a lot of EMDR jargon that really needs to be updated, and installing is one. It's fine for us, but not with a client. We're not a piece of software, although it has a similar impact in the nervous system. We tap in, and I was really inspired by Laurel. There's many colleagues here probably already know that I worked very closely with her for a number of years, and she was brilliant at how she distilled the essence of what makes effective EMDR. And in her phase 2 resourcing, she identifies nurturing figures, protector figures, and a wise figure or two. I'm autistic. I need to define things. I need to categorize them. So I've created what I call a framework. I don't like calling it a protocol because there is only one standard protocol. But it's how we use the 8 phases and the 3 prongs of the standard procedural steps. So in phase 2, the safe place for me is simply not enough. It's an opportunity to fire up We need to fire up the client's capacity for creative imagination, what Carl Jung would call creative imagination. And Laurel Parnell does this, but I do it in a much more explicit sort of frameworked way. So in my attachment-informed EMDR framework, in phase 2, with every single client, I do a safe place, special place, calm place, whatever you call it. And then I do 3 nurturing figures, qualities of warmth, kindness above all, tenderness, affection, love, safety. And they need to be a mixture of real, imaginary, human, animal, contemporary, historical, from movies, from personal experience. So and then I tap them in one by one and try and get a mix, not just all human or all imaginary or all male or all female. And then I do 3 protector figures, identify them in a row, tap them in one by one. And you can do it very quickly, 15 seconds each. And I don't spend weeks and months resourcing because you can do it so quickly and efficiently. And then 1 or 2, usually 1 wise figure, and tap them in as a team. And what we're doing there, Rotem, is in phase 2, we're firing up the capacity of the nervous system to imagine, to use creative imagination to actually rewire stories. So we front load, we get the brain used to the idea of creating imaginary processes. You know, we only live in imagination. We could bang on for hours about how the nervous system is constantly recreating external experience as an internal, an internal narrative. None of us live actually in the external present. We all live in our internal reconstruction of the present. So let's fire up the capacity of the brain to reimagine, to use imagination. Then we go into targeting in phase 3, not just assessment, but targeting. Key is target identification. And there it may be a target that we need to work with, which is a collective target, a tribal target, a national target. Working with Russians, and my daughter-in-law is Russian. I speak Russian, spent many years working in the old Soviet Union and a little bit more recently in later years in Russia. And the Russians and the Ukrainians in the way are carrying huge collective narratives. Just look what's happening, being acted out at a national level. You have to get them into therapy. Might be a bit of work to get the Russians and Putin into therapy. But if you're in there, you'd want to rework the Mongol invasions. You'd want to rework Ivan the Terrible. You'd want to rework the revolutions, the Holodomor in Ukraine, the purges, such a history, centuries of story. And you can work with them as targets, as if they're happening in the here and now.
Yeah. So first of all, good luck with getting Putin into therapy. But yeah, I think that I personally think that the result or the solution is psychedelics and not therapy. Put Putin and Trump and a bunch of other ones in the room and give them a lot of LSD, and there will be no wars anymore.
You do that.
There's no way. But anyway, I'm
a lot more skeptical about the human condition, but that's another story.
Yeah, but that's for another time, another conversation. Phase 3. Let's talk about phase 3 because you do phase 3 slightly differently from the standard protocol, and I'm wondering if you can briefly describe and explain the rationale to why you're doing it, why you're doing what you're doing.
Okay, so in the attachment-informed framework, as I say, it's not a protocol, it's a framework because it builds on the standard procedural steps. In phase 3 has 2 dimensions. And colleagues who might want to come if they've not already been on it, the 5-part webinar that we're relaunching next month, I think, isn't it?
Yes.
I take you through this in much more detail. And I'm presenting on this that's what I'm presenting on to EMDR next month. Charlie Chaplin recognizes that attachments are seriously salient. Charlie Chaplin, case conceptualization, recognized resourcing, we've done that today already, that target identification in phase 3 so Charlie Chaplin recognizes that attachments, appropriate activation, appropriate assessment. So in phase 3, there are 2 dimensions for me in EMDR standard phase 3. One is, how do we find a target? If we use the left brain to find a target, it'll stay left brain. I use the right brain and the limbic system and emotions and feelings and physical sensations to find the target. And I tell you, can I just do a little experiment with you, Rotem? We've got a few more minutes. It goes on then. Appropriate activation, I do image, emotion, body, belief most of the time rather than NCPC, VOC. I think that has to be reformed. That it works well with some clients.
Slow down. So image, emotion,
body, belief.
So the belief,
people,
what we call negative cognition, comes after
the emotion and the body.
Yeah,
but
and
that's the key thing.
Yes, go ahead.
That's what shakes people, or something. Oh no, is this still EMDR? I mean, I make no bones anymore that Shapiro put together a protocol 35 years ago that was of its time. She created a protocol which she could research and had sort of identifiers. And so she created in phase 3 NCPC, VOC, emotion, SUDS, body, go. That works brilliantly with some clients. Most clients, you don't need a lot of that clutter. And that's Parnell's brilliance in distilling it down into what she calls the modified protocol, which is image, emotion, body, belief, which is mainly right brain. And in target identification, so that's appropriate activation, whether you use the standard protocol, whether it's NCPC, or whether you use the modified protocol or the silent memories protocol, or, of different ways of firing it up, or Naipian level of urge to avoid, level of positive affect. In phase 3, there are different ways of firing up the target. The key piece in phase 3 for me is to use image, emotion, body, belief to find the target that we want to work on. Can I, in 2 minutes, Rotem, do a tiny piece of work with you?
Sure, let's do it.
Okay, right now, close your eyes. Bring your awareness to an experience of distress in the here and now, which you have a sense is rooted in old stuff, individual and collective. Just anything random, ever so quick. Have you got one? Don't need to tell us.
Yeah.
Image. Got an image?
Got it.
Emotion.
Yep.
Where that's happening in your body.
Right here.
Belief about yourself.
Yeah, I got it.
Taking all that together, image, emotion, body, belief, drop back in time. Go back as far as you can. Go back as far as you can. First place you land. Very first place you land. Literally the very first story that comes to mind. What is it?
I think it's kindergarten, like maybe age 5-ish.
Okay. Now, what I would do some work on that. Here's the attachment informed story that you're holding all these years later. I'm always curious when we land in kindergarten or school, aged 5, it's very common. I would do a video interweave. If we keep your eyes open here, just zoom back out, more intellectual now. We're just exploring. Little Rotem, age 5 in kindergarten. If the magic video camera can wind forward or backwards, it can zoom out or zoom in. I'm just curious about home and mum and the family. What do you just notice? The dynamic, the drama, the whatever it is, the context, particularly mum, because you have your experience at kindergarten, you've been taken there or you come back from it and mum has a response. She handles it in a particular way. Have you got it?
Yep.
Now, let's just sit mum down. You're my interpreter. Let's take little Rotem off, send him off with a resource team, nurturing figures, protective figures. He's being looked after elsewhere in our imagination. Okay. We've just landed, by the way. This is what we've just done. We've just flown our DeLorean into your childhood. I've been driving.
That was Mark's gift for Christmas from his kids.
That's right. So you've been in the passenger seat. I've driven it. We've landed back in your childhood with firing up the flux capacitor. Look, I have a flux capacitor. See that? I have a flux capacitor. Right. And now in this story, Rotem, age 5, mum, little Rotem's off being looked after by his resource team. I want to sit your mum down. I'd ask her name normally. We're doing it really quickly. You're my interpreter, adult Rotem, as dressed with your T-shirt. You're you today. You're sitting to one side. I'm going to say to your mum, right, you've just welcomed your little kid home, or you've just taken him off to kindergarten. What are you feeling? What are you feeling through Rotem? And Rotem will re-experience this in his body. This is the amazing thing. Emotions and body, this is resonating through from mum and from earlier. So what's mum? I would ask you her name, but don't worry. What's mum feeling? Tell me. In relation to little Rotem.
I think surprise.
Okay. Where would that be happening in her body?
Right here.
And what's her belief about herself? Being herself and being the mother of this little boy who's having this experience in kindergarten.
I'm not good enough. Not good enough mother.
And I would ask your mother, in your imagination, to drop back in time, to go back as far as she can, exactly the same protocol, as far back as she can go to when she was a little girl. In your imagination, you weren't there then. Well, you were actually in her uterus, not in uterus, in her ovaries. You were actually present as already the egg. So that's aside. Drop back. Just imagine your mother as a little girl. Where have we landed? In your imagination. Maybe you know. First place that comes to mind. You got one?
Yep.
Yep.
Her apartment with her, she had a very grumpy father.
There's our target. So how old is she in the story we've landed in?
Like 12 or 13.
Yeah, we'd start working with that. I'd be interested in earlier ones as well. Well done. Thank you for doing that little piece of work. But that's how simple it is. You double bounce, as it were. You use the present as the portal to the launch pad to get into the relevant past, not to talk about it, but to get in there. You target it, you work with it, and you have this radical curiosity as you go. Where is the absence of necessary repair? Little Rotem's having experiences at kindergarten. Where's mum? What's this triggering in mum? We don't talk about it. We use the imagination to do a piece of EMDR on mum. I did some amazing work with, and colleagues can look it up, with a CNN journalist who's written about it, so I can mention her name. And that is Arwa Damon, Arwaa-Damon. Her grandfather was, I think, the Prime Minister of Syria at the end of the Second World War, and he was assassinated. And she taught me how to do intergenerational work. Many years ago, before I developed what I call the intergenerational extended interweave. It's not a protocol, it's an extended interweave in the context of the standard protocol. And we did an amazing dialogue between her and her grandfather. It was so touching. And Awa has written about this, so you can look her up. In the context of October the 7th, by the way. She wrote about October the 7th.
Yeah.
So there you go. I think we've probably talked enough, haven't we now? 35 minutes.
Yeah, I want to mention one resource that, as a preparation for our conversation today, I just looked up, intergenerational trauma and ran into a book called Emotional Inheritance by Galit Atlas. Oh, there you go. Crystal has it. Yeah, I think it's really, really good. Well written by a psychoanalyst, originally from Israel. I didn't even know that she was from Israel when I got the book, but shares a lot of her own and her patients' intergenerational trauma. Very well written, very, very good book. I don't know, Crystal, if you
There's quite a lot out there. I think the thing that differentiates the way I work from everything that I've read about EMDR being used for intergenerational narratives, and there's quite a lot of discussion out there now. And it's interesting, we've moved from the term transgenerational trauma to intergenerational. I think one of the reasons, and I shifted my terminology in 2019, when I was presenting to Laurel Parnell's conference of her Parnell Institute in San Francisco in October 2019. I had to sit and actually decide for myself, what am I going to call this? And I plumped for intergenerational rather than transgenerational, partly because trans has got an awful lot of other meanings at the moment. But intergenerational allows for the ricochet backwards and forwards of experience up and down the generations. And you can heal. I mean, I don't believe in sort of healing past lives out there in any sense. I think it's just in the body and being of the client that's sitting in front of us. We're working with whatever's encoded in their system, explicitly or implicitly. You can go so far back up. I mean, I think I might have told you at one point, Rotem, I was working with a Jewish colleague of mine, and we went back to the destruction of the temple in Jerusalem in AD 70. And with another Jewish client, we were back with Moses in Egypt. You know,
Yeah.
not with all cultures you're going to go quite back that far, but with a Russian, you might find it. With Putin, you go back to the founding of the Kievan Rus 1,000 years ago, and the arrival of Christianity because he's still tangled up in that drama.
Yeah.
The journalist Jenny, oh hello Jenny from New Zealand. That's nice to see her here. It's Arwa Damon, ARWADAMON. And if you Google Arwa Damon Brayne, you'll probably get her piece.
Yeah. Okay, Mark, I want to give our members an opportunity to ask you some questions. So before that, I want to talk about, for people who want to learn more from you, you're going to present at the EMDR virtual conference next month. We also are hosting you in our book club, September, October, November, December. And that's a very, very affordable way to learn directly from Mark about Unleash Your EMDR, his book that now it has an updated version on Amazon. So you can get it for what, $12? What is it on Amazon?
The Kindle is about $12. The printed version, there's two printed versions. You can read hardback. That's the paperback version. This is the hardback. Hardback is about $25. Possibly a bit less. We know the pound is quite strong at the moment, so probably a little bit more. And the paperback version is about £15, so about $20.
Yeah. Okay. So we'll do that in the book club, but we're also starting a second cohort of your course starting on September 12th. So we will have recorded content that Mark specifically recorded for this course. And then over 5 weeks, we will have 5 2-hour meetings. So we can really, you can learn this stuff, try it with your clients, come back with questions, try it with your clients more, fine tune your skills. And for those who want to take the extra step, Mark also offers for those who sign up for the course, and you can just purchase that through the EMDR Learning community, to have 3 follow-up consultations with Mark after the course is over. I think I covered it all, Mark. Anything else?
Julie is sensibly asking if you've got the original book, and thank you, Nancy, for saying you love the books. It means a lot to me. Julie asking if you've got the original book, should we get the updated version for the book club? Yes. If you've got the Kindle version, now most people have bought the physical version. I've about a quarter of the folk who buy my book buy the Kindle version, and the rest go for hard copies or printed copies. If you've got the Kindle version, you just need to delete it locally on your Kindle app and re-download, you'll get the new version. It's as simple as that. If you've got the physical book and you really have genuinely bought it, drop me a line through EMDR Focus. Just Google me and send me a note. I'll send you a PDF of the new version, as long as you promise not to send it around, because I don't make a lot of money out of this, but you know, it gives me, I hate writing. I was a former BBC journalist. I have a writing phobia, which is slightly ironic. And it's the first book I've ever published, and I self-published because it's the second version, 2024, Alison, that's right. I'm sort of quite proud of it, although I did try to put it to a publishing house and they said it's not really for us. but I've got full control of the content, which I actually is much better that way around these days. So I'm very happy to send you a PDF. If you already bought the physical book and you'd like the new version and want to be part of the book club, and you sign up to the book club, as a sort of precondition, if you signed up to the book club and you like the new PDF, maybe I could send you that, Rotem. And if people ask you, you could just send it off to them.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a funny comment in the chat by Lisa saying, let's get Mark in discussion with the fidelity
with the protocol, with the thought police.
Yeah.
Yeah. I have, let me speak to that briefly, Lisa. Thank you for that note. I am quite clear, and I now say this publicly, I think the EMDR standard protocol needs updating. The Council of Scholars that convened I think before was convened by EMDRIA, with support at that time from EMDR Europe, which is no longer the case, unfortunately, before Shapiro's death, was convened 50 luminaries from EMDR around the world to have a collective think about where EMDR needs to go in the future. And it was quite clear that, EMDR needs to evolve. Any therapy that cannot evolve, look at CBT, how it's changed, look at psychoanalysis, it changed through Jung and various things. Person-centered, you have to evolve. And I think it's time for the standard protocol, as it's the wording of the standard protocol, to be updated. 8 phases, 100% doesn't need updating in my view. The 3 prongs, absolutely not. The standard procedural steps, the structure and focus of EMDR, targeting, AIP, they don't need to be updated because they work. But the detail, the language, and including phase 3, how you fire up the target, you do not always need a positive cognition. Many of you will leave that out in your work because you think, oh God, life's too short. I've got to get on with this. And you get to work and it works. You can do really effective EMDR without even naming a cognition at all, even without naming the target you're working with. But the client knows, even if you don't as a therapist. That's the silent memories protocol. And it works just as well as the standard protocol. So I have read in detail Andrew Leeds's, the team that put together, I think with Deb Dana, the fidelity protocol. It's got a lot, fidelity checker. It's got a lot that's very good. I've updated it with a view to research for the attachment-informed version. I'd be very happy to share that spreadsheet. I mean, the ideas I came up with colleagues who might like to test drive it and send me feedback. Because EMDR has to be a work in progress. That's why my book constantly gets updated. Why my protocols, my frameworks, my extended interweaves constantly get updated. I mean, I've just changed the colors in the standard in my main framework. So the book also now needs to be updated again. So I would say to the thought police, to the fidelity checkers, do not get lost. Do not get hung up where dogma becomes more important than the client. Hayden
Absolutely.
saying,
and just to kind of follow up on something that we talked about before, but maybe not everybody knows, Francine Shapiro was very defensive of the protocol because she was very research oriented. And, you can't do research if you constantly change the protocol. You can't show consistent outcomes, right? You want to show consistent outcomes with a consistent protocol. And this is part of the reason why you see still in a lot of basic trainings, there's just, this is a protocol, you can't even think left or right, not to mention doing anything left and right. But I agree with you, Mark. I think that, EMDR has evolved a lot. There's a lot more happening than the standard protocol. And I think it does make sense what you said about we're finding targets that are coming from the right brain, because this is where our client psychopathology lives, in that part of the brain. That's what we need to work with.
That's right. I think it's important that the language around when we talk about standard protocol, it really traps us. I think we need to, my invitation to the EMDR community is to re-understand the standard protocol, as Shapiro herself was beginning to do in the 3rd edition. I was in Edinburgh in 2014 when Shapiro came to speak in one of her last big international engagements. And I have to say, I was rather shocked at how rigid she was around, you've got to stick to the protocol, you must not use anything other than eye movements and so on. But the paradox is, I mean, she was sort of worshipped as a guru, which puts my back up, any kind of guru worship. If anybody ever thinks that I'm a guru, I'll shoot them down as quickly as I can and say, no, I'm, flawed as anybody else. But interestingly, in Shapiro's third edition, which came out in 2017, actually, she allows for a lot of adaptation, a lot of flexibility. It's a bit like the Bible. You can find arguments in the Bible for virtually any interpretation of Christianity or Islam that you like, or or in the Quran. It's our Bible, and different people have different interpretations of different bits of Shapiro's standard manual. But actually, if she, in a kind of throwaway line here or there, if this doesn't work, try something else. If the positive cognition is getting in the way, well, don't do it. If the client is highly activated, just get going. She hardly talks about attachment. It's shocking how little reference there is to attachment in her final book. And it really is time for the EMDR international community to take a deep breath and say, right, what is it about EMDR that actually delivers the goods? Is it the wording? I mean, let's have some research. Let's unpack EMDR in all its dimensions and say, what is it about the standard protocol as we understand it that seems to work? Leeds will say there's research that shows that people who stick to the standard protocol get better results than people who don't.
It's not
Now,
just stick to the standard protocol, it's reading the protocol verbatim. That's the research that he quotes in his book.
Lisa puts it very nicely. I mean, I bang on about this, Lisa Galliano here. The standard protocol is the grammar of EMDR, but we'll never speak a language well if we don't get the grammar first. But we have the grammar, but the grammar, you can write Jack and Jill went up the hill, or you can write, if music be the food of love, play on. And what we're trying to do, what we need to do, what our clients want us to do, is to create a work of art. That's why I love your work, Rotem, the art and science of EMDR. Absolutely, the art and science of psychotherapy. The art of psychotherapy. There's so many books about how good psychotherapy is an art form. And if we approach EMDR as a cookie cutter, protocol read script that we have to stick to the script. If we deviate from the script, we're not doing EMDR. It doesn't serve our clients, and it doesn't serve the future of EMDR. We will be left aside by the steamroller of history.
Exactly. And Hayden mentioned in the chat above that our clients are not cookie cutters, so we can't use a cookie cutter approach. I want to say one more thing about the course, and I'm posting in the chat the link to sign up, but or I'm trying to, but something is happening. I don't want finances to be a barrier for people to take your course. So if someone has a hard time signing up because of the cost, by the way, it's in early bird until the end of the week, and then it goes up $50. But if someone's having a hard time, please message me. You can private message me, or you can email me, and we'll find a way for you to take Mark's course, because I think it really is transformative in terms of working with this intergenerational, with the attachment, with the things that many of us did not learn, because we don't learn what Mark is teaching. We do not learn in our basic EMDR training. And so many of our clients who are coming to see us in our offices don't have simple trauma. They have the detachment wounds, they have these intergenerational traumas that just can't be resolved with, just reading the standard protocol verbatim. Don't do that. Don't try it at home.
And I also, I do full on 3 half days, so 15 hours online, training workshops. Unleash Your EMDR Part 1 and Unleash Your EMDR Part 2, which I host, which aren't on your platform. The what you get if you join us for your cohort is a kind of fast and low dash across the fundamental principles, including dreams and working with parts. I love working with parts. I've got a simple extended interweave for working with parts. I was doing a piece earlier today with somebody who we went back to aged 5, and this individual really, really wanted the soft toy. What was it? It was a turtle. It was a turtle from books by Seuss. What's his name? Something the turtle. Age 5, and wanted the soft toy that her 3-year-old sister had, and got into terrible trouble for persuading the 3-year-old sister to hand it over. And mother gave the 5-year-old absolute hell. Number 3 was the 3-year-old was the golden child. So what we did is a transfer of perspective into the turtle, into the soft toy. And the soft toy in her internal psyche, how this soft toy was embedded in her psyche over many, many decades, had all the wisdom she needed to be able to bring compassion to herself. She wasn't a bad girl. She was just 5. And she longed for all of the attention and the softness that her 3-year-old sister was getting from mummy. It constellated in the turtle. So working with parts and the transfer of perspective, Yertle the turtle, Jenny, that's the one, it's magical work. On at the end, I was listening to, where was I? I think it was at the EMDR Consultants Day the other day last week, which was great fun. There were about 150 of us, mainly from North America, but I was the only Brit, for an EMDR hosted day of looking how to work with supervisees, consultees, and consultants in training. And one of our colleagues said, you really shouldn't call EMDR magic because it's science. Of course, but good magic is also science. It's just that we now understand the neurobiology of what used to be understood as magic. And we are spellbusting, but we're busting neural networks that are now dysfunctional, past neural networks that are dysfunctional in the present. And the magic of EMDR blows your socks off. I daren't wear socks because my socks are blown off every single day. That's a metaphor, by the way. And I'm happy to use the word magic. That's why in my book I have Unleash Your EMDR, Release the Magic. But the magic understood as the neurobiological patterns that need to be bust. And if we bring creative imagination and a flexibility and a curiosity and a willingness to go there where our clients' nervous systems lead us, it's the nearest things to magic I've ever come across.
A couple of things, Mark. So first of all, Julie says the description on Amazon for the Kindle says 2024, but then it also puts 2022 on the Kindle date.
Yeah,
will this
the
be
publication,
the right one?
let me explain that. The publication date has to remain 2022, which was when the first version was published. I would have to create a whole new book online as edition 2, and it might have been the best way to do it, but it seems to work, given that I've got full control of the content, it seems to work slightly better this way around. I don't want to leave the first edition even up there for sale, on sale. I'd have to take the first one off sale in order to create the new one. So the publication date stays 2022, but the version 2 that you download is 2024.
Okay. One little quick technical detail. Someone asked me in chat privately, because of our platform, there's a incompatibility with iPhone and iPad. You cannot sign up for the course on iPhone or iPad. You'll have to log into our community through your laptop or desktop. But if this is a barrier, again, feel free to, I have a workaround for it, but just private message me, or you can email me, and I'm going to put my email in the chat. And Mark Phillips is asking again about the name of the Syrian reference.
Syrian, that's Arwa Damon and her grandfather. I'm not sure she mentions that her grandfather was the Prime Minister of Syria in the post-war period in the piece that she wrote, but she's very open. Arwa's extremely open. She won't mind me naming that. It was before I really knew what I was doing. It was the most tender piece of work, the dialogue that she had with her grandfather. I don't believe that there's a literal grandfather out there in the spirit world. I don't need to believe that. But her grandfather lives on in her nervous system as experienced in her, the narrative that was passed on, because she was born after he died. But he sort of lived on in the mother's narrative and in the collective narrative of the community as well. And
yeah,
so we
I
were
think
able to work
the
with him.
collective narrative is talked a lot about in this book that I mentioned, the emotional inheritance.
Yeah. By the way, one thing I will say, Rotem, as we approach the end of our hour together, is a lovely note that I got from the conference at Laurel Parnell's conference in 2019 in San Francisco, because Philip Manfield, he of Flash, and a colleague came to do an afternoon or a day, actually. It was great fun. And I think it was either Phil, I think it was probably his colleague, who made this unforgettable comment that when you're working with the dead, people sometimes ask, can you use a resource figure that's dead, a dog that's dead, or a grandmother who's no longer alive?
Yeah.
When you're working with the dead, they always say the right thing. When you're working with the imaginal spirit or the imaginal sense of the dead person, however far back it is, the wisdom that comes through, whether it's from Yertle the turtle or Arwa's grandfather, you can absolutely trust it. You can say, well, what would your grandfather say to you now? What would the son you lost who took his own life, what would he say to you now? Every single time it's a version of, it's okay, you can let go now. It can be so moving. So never be afraid of working with the dead.
Okay. Mark Brayne, thank you so much for your time. It's always a pleasure talking to you. And I think that I always learn something new. And I think that many of us are learning something new. So thank you. And we will start our course, our first live meeting on September 12th.
Lovely. And thank you for the comments in mind blowing, says Lala. That's lovely, Layla. Thank you so much. And the spreadsheet, if anybody would like my fidelity checker for the attachment informed, it's very informal. It hasn't been formally validated and so on. Probably easiest if you drop me a line, or drop you a line, Rotem, and I can put it up. I'm happy to put it on your platform for test driving.
Please do.
What do people think about it?
By the way, like, people always ask me, can I post? Do you mind if I post? Just post things on the community if it's relevant to anything related to therapy or EMDR or to private practice or whatever we're doing. Just post it. You don't need my permission. It's
yeah. And the other thing, my intergenerational extended interweave is obviously in my book. It's one of my crown jewels. It is something I have dreamed up, I've worked up, and it's evolved over many, many years. It's been fine-tuned, and I'm very happy for people to test drive it. So I'm happy to put it on, if colleagues would like to have a copy of that, give it a go. It's got it is like a protocol. It's actually got here are words you might want to consider using. It's got the whole structure of the extended interweave. Takes a bit of getting used to, but if colleagues would like to try it out, and then come on a group, come on one of your groups, or come on a webinar and ask some questions. The most exciting things happen usually now in the space where we have a discussion, because that's where we go deep and we talk about real cases, not just theory. Okay.
Exactly. Thank you so much, Mark. Thanks
Okay.
everyone for joining.
Take care, everyone.